Welcome back to another episode of TFC Talks, where we dive into the important conversations that support a balanced and connected life. I'm your host, Amanda Davison, a licensed marriage and family therapist and CEO of the Family Connection. And today we're talking about something that can be a little tricky for all of us, finding gratitude in our lives, for our families, for what we have, even when times are tough and even in the midst of the struggle. So, whether it's navigating conflict, managing stress, or simply feeling overwhelmed by the challenges that come with relationships, today we're going to explore how we can keep gratitude alive in our family dynamics and allow that to be our perspective. A quote came up this morning that really hit home with this, and it says, "The key to breaking through the gratitude trap is the realization that gratitude and dissatisfaction are not in conflict with each other. There is a significant difference between shaming your struggles away and putting them into perspective." Our goal today is to be able to put those things into perspective, and I am so honored and excited to have one of the most intelligent women I have had the pleasure of getting to know, Abena Marfowaa Owusu-Nkwantabisah. Abena Marfowaa Owusu-Nkwantabisah, a licensed marriage and family therapist, a marriage and family counselor, and a clinical therapist who has worked extensively with families to help them overcome difficult times. Abena is an expert in so many things, and one of the things you'll find out about her is that she was a medical doctor and she has transitioned to really see the whole picture, from having the medical expertise to also now really being such an expert in behavioral health and family patterns. She is on her way to being certified as in working with infants and a giant parent psychotherapist. She has talents that are endless. She has a kids and a husband who are amazing, and we are so privileged to get to sit at her feet. Not only does she have all of that going for her, but she was also named 40 under 40 in Albuquerque. So thank you so much, Abena, for joining us. You really bring so much value, not just in your wisdom, but in your presence and who you are. And so I'm so excited that you and our podcast listeners that I and our podcast listeners get to learn from you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you for having me here.
So excited.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about maybe some challenges that families face.
Okay, so what I have observed, right, in all my interactions with people, it will be either language barrier, it could be culture, right? That is really huge. It could be faith, difference in faith, beliefs. It could be just different experiences from, both the individuals, right? So that brings a lot of, I would say, experiences that needs to be looked upon when two people decide to be together, right? So if these challenges are not looked upon, of course, it will be an endless conflict throughout. So, yeah, these are just the major ones. Like, it could be language barrier, culture, it could be faith, beliefs, it could be just a way communication patterns, right, that has been passed on from generation to generation, right? So, there could be a lot, but these are just a few.
Yeah, I love that what you're talking about is essentially in families, right? Families are comprised of a series of unique individuals
Yes.
with different lived experiences, different cultures, different backgrounds, different patterns, different, so many other things, languages, things that you brought up,
Yep.
that when they come together, a lot of times those differences, which makes them strong,
Yes. Make them unique.
make them unique.
Yep.
also leads to things like the communication breakdowns,
Yes.
the stressors, or maybe even at times conflicting values or beliefs.
Definitely, you are right on. There are a lot of families that I have encountered that, even in my practice with families, you can see a lot, playing out. And how can I, as a therapist, help them to see, even me, myself, and even the way I was brought up, right? And the way my husband was brought up, right? Two different worlds. And there need to be something that brings us together and decide to stay on that track, right? Irrespective of our differences, right? So,
Yeah, I love that what you're talking about is kind of that shared meaning, right? Like
yes.
we're choosing to take a little bit of the ingredients from here, the little bit of ingredients from here, and we might even bring some outside ingredients to
Yep.
create our own unique recipe
Yes.
and stay on that track. And so sometimes in those moments, it can be hard for us when there are such distinct differences to
Yes.
find gratitude for the uniqueness
Yes.
that is brought to the table. When you see that in your families, how do you invite them in to both acknowledge the struggles that they have, but also be able to find gratitude for the differences and the
Right.
uniqueness that is their family unit?
Okay. I I strongly believe that every person has that capacity, right, to see the other person's view. However, right, the way we have been brought up sometimes is very difficult, and we might be fixed on this is what we know, and it has worked for us so long that we don't want to change, right? So when I'm able to help the family see that I understand that this is what has worked for you all these while, and because this is not working now, you think it is a problem coming from the other person, right? How can we work together to see, the other side? So it's more of not getting stuck, right, in your own, solutions, but be able to be open-minded, right? To be able to see the other person's, but it doesn't come that quickly for them, right? Sometimes it takes a while, it takes a lot of work, it takes courage. I would say that word,
Absolutely.
because this is something that they have not tried before. And as a therapist, right, if you have not tried something before, your body response is, nope, I'm not gonna really touch it, right? I'm not gonna go there at all. So there will be fight, flight, and the freeze responses. So definitely it's something that we go in slow, so that we can work on having that mindset, changing that mindset, right? To be able to see the other person's perspective. But it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I hear you saying a lot of things in there that bring such wisdom. One of which is that in order to take the other person's perspective, it's almost like we have to give ourselves permission
Yes.
to be willing to
Yes.
see the other perspective. And that doesn't necessarily mean agree with the other perspective.
Yes.
It's really being able to hold both. I just am looking to see it through your eyes.
Yes.
And they may not be my eyes, and I may not agree with it, but at least I can see where you're coming from. And ideally, I may be able to find at least 1% that I can agree with.
Exactly. You're right on. And I think that's where the radical acceptance comes in, right? Like being able to accept what it is, because this is the reality of the other person. You don't have to agree, right? You don't have to approve of it. But just trying to even start from there and understand what the person is saying might be the way, to open conversation about the struggle or the conflict.
Wow, I love what you're saying, and I can't help but think of like the season that we're coming in, coming off of an election season, and how hard it is at times when the person that you wanted to win didn't, or the person that you wanted to win did. Like, and there's just such division,
Yes,
right? And
yes.
so when we think about that, what I'm hearing you say we could potentially do as a country is look to see what the other person's views might be,
Right.
and focus on the places where there's some alignment
Yes.
versus on the things where there's division.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
And that it's okay to have places where we disagree.
It is okay. Perfectly.
How do you deal with people who really struggle to see that disagreement with an opinion might often feel like disagreement with who I am as a person? How do you separate those, or how do you teach somebody to separate those things out as a foundation towards gratitude?
So, mostly, people come in with that understanding that they have grown to believe that, this is who I am. And there is that difficulty in differentiating between the actions and the person. So we would just start with something minimal. We will not even take whatever the person brought to session. We take something minimal, right? And then explore, right? Who are you? And what are you saying? What are your actions, right? It takes a long time for people who are fixated. And I believe that the reason why they are fixated on their opinions is because it has worked for them all this while. So why should I change, right? So being able to work with them and say, hey, we are social beings. We interact with people. You cannot exist in a vacuum, right? So if you want us to have this interaction or even have interaction with your person, try and see if you can understand where the person's coming from. And also know that the person is different from the action. Right? So if you put them together, that will lead to a lot of blaming. Right? It will lead a lot of, calling names. But being able to really differentiate between this is the person and this is the action, we are going to address the action, but not, the personhood of this individual. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Let's take it like even into like everyday life, like parenting, right? I know you have two amazing kids who are perfect from everything I can see.
Yeah.
But they're human, so I assume there's been moments
Lots.
where you've had to redirect things. So they always give us opportunities to learn and grow and take some of the things that served us in our own child rearing.
Yes.
Actually in our growing up years, right? And then also kind of incorporate them. And so how do you separate out, like, my child just broke this from probably doing something I told them already 10 times not to do.
Yes.
Right? From my child is bad. How do you separate those things out?
Right.
And how do you help people in your practice separate those things out?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I will give an example, actually. I had my son was playing, and I had glass at the other end of the building, and I said, don't run to this side, many times. So he ran, I'll stop him. And this time, I couldn't stop because I was focused on the glass. I was just putting things together, and then he ran into that, and he broke everything, and he hurt himself.
Oh, my mom heart hurts for you.
And at that moment, I don't know how many times I've told him not to come there, right? Like, it's not like he was somewhere else and I was shouting. Like, I said, don't come here, like more than 10 times. So at that moment, of course, the anger is there, right? However, the child is feeling very sad and hurt, right? So it took me a while just to breathe because literally I needed to breathe and then look at what is happening, do some emergency thing to stop the bleeding, and then take him to the emergency before we talk about, what you have done, right? So when you do that, you put the anger aside. Whatever comes out, right, it's actually genuine. The child will feel that you genuinely care and want to take care of him. Like for my child, like he knew that whatever he has done is not good, but that wasn't the time to talk about it. Like we would need to take you to the doctor. So taking the anger aside will reduce me raising my voice, right? Because when you're angry, it comes with raising voices, right? And being able to focus on the action and what the action has brought to him, and giving him the necessary things that is needed, taking him to the doctor to be fixed, right, was the first step, and it helped. And afterwards, when everything calmed down, then he came and said, "Mommy, I'm very sorry. I didn't listen to you." I said, "I know. You did not listen." And from that time, he listens. Like, at least I don't have to say 10 times, maybe 5, but he remembers those moments. If my anger had led the way, it would be a different story, right? So I'm giving this example so that you can see the action versus the person, right? If I had defined him with the action, right, he would think that he's a bad person, right? But he didn't. Like, and he onwards, all his actions were, I would say, relatively okay, because he's still a kid. He might do something, and he came back. He knew it. I think it was time for him to process what has happened, and then because I didn't lead with anger, he also calmed down, and that is one thing that, as parents, we can help. Our kids.
It's a part of relationship, and I think
It's normal.
It is. It's normal. And I look at some of the stats even on conflict, and some of the stats kind of say, that the prevalence of children with elevated family conflict across communities ranges from 24.5% to 47.9%. Stress within the parent-child relationship, right? 12% of children in couple-parent families lived with at least one parent reporting relationship distress. 90% of mothers and 95% of fathers report work-family conflict. And so when we start looking at all of these, and then in a study of teenagers, 28% of adolescents reported that there was conflict in their home, and 20% were concerned with their parents' relationship.
Yes.
So conflict, whether it's work, whether it's within our relationships, whether it's within our homes, is something that is very normal.
Yes,
Like,
it is.
It is a part of being in relationship with people.
Yes, it is something that you cannot take away in relationship. It is how it is, because two people or two or more people decided to come together, right? Definitely there are differences, and that creates those conflicts. So how do we deal with it, right? In a family, if we want to move together, right, as a family unit. And I think that's where the challenge comes in, for each individual to see what role they play so that the family can continue to be in one unit. So.
Yeah, I think you brought a couple really great points out that I just want to highlight. So one of the things that I heard you say is to normalize conflict within the family dynamic. So by not engaging with your kids' conflict, you encouraged them that they had the skills necessary to resolve it.
Exactly.
And also if they needed to support to come to you. And I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that, in giving them permission to be uncomfortable, right? Because conflict is uncomfortable.
Very,
To get to a place of resolution, and not putting that like danger button on it saying conflict is bad, which kind of goes back to what you said before in separating the behavior of conflict from maybe a person or a judgment about it.
Right. Right. Yeah, definitely. It is very important to know that conflict is normal and it can happen between the spouses, right? It can happen between siblings or sibling and parent. It is very normal. So how the parent look at it, right, and how the parent approach it when that happens is very crucial. It all also stems from how they have looked at conflict in their past, right? So when I do have kind of parents coming in having child parent conflict, right? How does the mom see conflict? How were they resoluted, right, when they had it in while she was growing up in her childhood years? And now, how does she bring that experience into solving conflict between her and the child, right? So it's more of really looking at the patterns that has been created, right? And then just leaving the ones that does not work and helping the mom to have an open mind to learn different ways, right? Yeah.
And learning how to evaluate that, because what may work within one stage of childhood
Yes.
or of a relationship may not work
Yes.
in future stages. And so being able to have those skills to evaluate
Yep.
what you want to keep, and also evaluate what maybe you're ready to let go of. It served you for the season,
Yes.
but now it's time to find a different path.
Yes.
I love that you're talking about keeping that flexible thinking pattern in there.
Yes, that is amazing way to move on and have a good relationship with whoever is in the family. Because sometimes as parents, sometimes we forget that the child grows. And as they grow, in each stage of their life, right, you will encounter a different conflict, right? But as parents, we think that, okay, this is what I know worked as this child was a child, and as they're growing, it's very difficult to change that mindset, right? And have a flexible thinking and seek different ways to solve the conflict that will come. So yeah, it's kind of like ongoing learning and really putting it out there for the parent to know that this is not a fixed thing, right? It will keep changing. I always use the example, your child is not a child anymore. You see your child grow. There is always a change. That means you also, in your thinking, right, in your interaction with your child, needs to change as they grow. So sometimes they might accept it immediately. Sometimes it takes time, but it's all about how they have perceived, their childhood and how the expectation of their child, right? What they want to see versus the child's personality, right? How they can help to develop the child's personality. And I'll come back to my children, right? They have their own personality. I could force them, right? No, you should not do this, right? But in this way, you are putting them down, and this causes a lot of mental health problems, right? As they grow, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, depressive moods, anxiety, right? And I know that my daughter has some sort of anxiety coming up. So when she is pushed down a little bit, and I know my son does that sometimes, those anxiety symptoms comes up. And then how to navigate that, helping my son to see her perspective. Of course, my son doesn't love it. He
It's
wants
not
his
always
way.
easy.
Exactly. But at the end, we are able to move through that transition because it's needed. That change needs to happen so that they can learn and move on to the next stage, right? So I know I've said a lot of things here, but it needs a lot of, for the parent to understand that change is consistent. It will keep coming. Your child will grow. The child also will change, right, internally based on maybe the things that is happening inside and the factors, right, surrounding them. So how can we meet them where they are at in each stage of their lives?
I love that. And I think that wisdom that you bring about meeting, children where they are and at each stage that they are
Yeah.
also translates to adult relationships, because adult to adult relationships are not the same that they were a day ago, a year
Yes.
ago, a month ago, 10 years from now. They're constantly changing
Yes.
because the people in the relationship are changing. And so recognizing that change isn't something to fear.
Yes.
Change is a part of growth, and we want that growth to happen because that's when we see health, right?
Yes,
It's when
yes.
we stop growing, or when a plant or stops growing, that we start going, oh,
Uh-oh.
right? Something's
Yep.
wrong, versus being able to say, yeah,
Yep.
like growth is what we want to see,
Yep.
because
Yep.
that's ultimately what we're desiring.
Exactly. Exactly.
One of the other things I wanted to highlight that you brought up as a key component to that I think ties into the gratitude discussion is the need for us to manage our own emotions. And it doesn't mean ignore them, right? We want to label them and we want to acknowledge them. And so one of the things that I just love this saying, regulate before you educate.
Yes.
Right? So really means like check your emotions before you tell somebody your opinion or your thoughts, or you try to teach them something. It means really make sure that you're coming to a place and you've dealt with what's coming up for you in a place where you're in a growth mindset, you're willing to learn, you're willing to be able to engage in conversation. And if you're not there, then that's the first step
Yes.
to take care of, and to let yourself have your feelings, but not let those feelings dictate for you.
Yes. I totally agree with that. I'll go back to my son and our relationship when he got into the glass, right? So I was angry, right? I was very angry. However, I was thinking, I need to deal with this anger. What will be the end result if I acted in that anger? So I had to deal with it, acknowledge it. Okay, this is anger. This is coming out. Why is it coming out? It's coming out because he didn't listen. Okay, but is it what is right now at stake? Right? So being able to really deal with it, and then being able to see the actual thing that is happening in front of you, because anger wouldn't solve the bleeding. Right? It will not, to actually make things worse, right?
Absolutely.
So really rethinking of the consequences of you acting on your emotions. And definitely the brain, I love the brain.
So good.
Right? I always say that like the brain is our check mark. It does tell us that something has happened. Our emotional part of the brain is there for a reason. As you said, like you need to recognize it. It tells us that something is wrong. However, the logical part of the brain tells us what to do with the feelings we have. Now, the brain also have the thinking part, and we don't want to use that because usually it's irrational, right? And if I had acted angrily, I think my son, I don't know what will happen, the outcome. So definitely, yes, checking ourselves in that moment is very hard. It's actually literally taking some few seconds to breathe. Taking those deep breaths works. It does shift that mentality from the emotional part to the logical part to think what to do in the moment, right? So definitely, I agree with you. Emotions needs to be checked before, you make any decision. If not, then I don't think it will end well.
Yeah, I think part of what you're saying, and I really appreciate it, is you're talking about coming to situations, relationships, gratitude, experiences from a whole brain place.
Yes.
Right? Which whole brain means really acknowledging the emotional, but also, taking advantage and acknowledging the logical, that one is not bigger or better than the other.
Yes.
That they both exist, and when they come together, it's beautiful, right?
Yes.
And really, I think about a car analogy, right? It would not work super well if we were driving around with one wheel.
Yes.
And alternating one wheel.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
We're designed to have balance on the sides with either two wheels, or if you're really super cool and you can drive a motorcycle, which I cannot, but if you are, you
Yeah.
still want those two wheels
Yes.
to create that balance. And
Exactly.
that's ultimately how our brain was created as well.
Yep, and I agree with that. It's called the wise mind, right? Integrating your emotional part of the brain and the logical part to create that wise decision in the moment. And it doesn't come easy. Like, it takes a lot of practice, especially if you have had that experience of always coming from the emotional part of the brain. It takes a great deal of really self-awareness, right? Being able to acknowledge that, and it takes a lot of work, to work through that.
And I love what you're talking about is that, like, whatever we've come from, whether that was a high emotional sense where maybe that wheel was out of balance, or whether it was a logical sense where maybe that emotion or that was the logic was out of balance, right?
Yeah.
That being able to bring both and practice both,
Yes.
even if we sometimes feel like we're Bambi, right? Walking on really like funny legs that we're not sure it's going to work out,
Yes.
can build resilience that can help us endure life's
Yes.
challenges.
It is. And what is resilience, right? Like, as you bring it up, resilience is, it doesn't have one word for resilience. It can be built through a process. It's a journey, right? And at the end, the outcome that you get, the resilience, would come from a lot of things that you've gone through in your life, right? And the things that you've gone through, it doesn't matter how old you were. It could be even just a short while in your childhood. It could be in your adulthood. It doesn't matter what time in your life you had it. But it could be built based on the things you've gone through and successfully coming out of that, right? And when you are able to go through that, that means some of the outcomes is flexibility, being able to adapt, right, to changes, because you have gone through it and you have worked through it and you have come to this place where it helps you to cope with things better. Right.
And your son is a great example of that,
yeah.
right? Like, he took a really challenging time where maybe it
Right.
wasn't his best choices, right?
Right.
But he was able to demonstrate resilience by coming through and coming to you, apologizing,
Yes.
and then adjusting his learning patterns
Yes.
to listen at a different degree than he did before. And that's a
Yeah.
really great example of what resilience can look like.
Yes, yes. It is, in the moment, you might not feel that you are building that, but I think patience is really important when you're going through, struggles in life. You are learning to adapt because it takes patience, it takes growth mindset, being flexible and understanding the other person. In couples, in families, right? How do you build resilience moving forward? It's more of the flexibility, right? Adaptation, successfully being open to see the other person's perspective. You don't have to agree, right? You can agree to disagree and then move forward, right? And that helps us to exist. Each other's opinion is heard. It's not pushed aside, right? And I think that will build that resiliency in the family as they move forward.
I love that. You kind of, I think of almost a recipe card in what I'm hearing. And like Abena in your chef apron is saying, some of the recipe building for resilience is a combination of flexibility. It's a combination of perspective taking, really being able to see what the other person is bringing. It's a combination of that wise mind, both the emotional and the logical.
Yep.
It's an example of like bringing in some of that growth mindset. This may have happened, but what can I take or leave moving forward?
Exactly.
And then I would argue that we would want to add in gratitude, right?
Yes.
Being able to choose what we focus on. It doesn't mean that the heart isn't there.
Yes.
But it does give us an opportunity to start to appreciate the things that we have.
Right.
And
right.
so when we think about exploring maybe or fostering a practice of gratitude, and this is something I think that you do exceptionally well, is you naturally come to the table with so much gratitude. Can you give us some strategies to also kind of incorporate that out and round that out? So, especially as we approach this month, how do we have gratitude
Okay.
without that toxic positivity of I just need to be grateful, which says ignore the hard.
Right. So I think about gratitude in different dimensions, right? Somebody will think as gratitude as a moral virtue, right? Somebody will think of it as a personality trait. Somebody will think of it as a coping skill, right? All these come together. For me, I think in each moment of my life, gratitude have played a role, either being a coping skill for me, being a personality trait, being a moral virtue, being an attitude, being something that I need to share with somebody. So if what we are talking about here is put together, resiliency, right? Going through life, being able to be flexible, learn, having the growth mindset. At the end, right, there is that. When you look back, there is this gratitude of, where was I, and now where I am, right? Having that understanding of looking back and seeing where you are, and understanding that each experience that came into your life had a purpose, right? Not having a fixed mindset, having those flexible mindset, and seeing that, okay, what did I learn from this that happened? And who am I now? Because I see that maybe 10 years ago, if we were to do this, it would be a whole
Yes.
different, right? Different level. And I see that as a wow, I have grown a lot. Looking at how I have been flexible to allow myself to learn through the experience that I've gone through. They are not all easy peasy, right? They are all not fun. But I had to give myself that grace to move one step at a time and be hopeful that this is for a good cause. And it is. Like, I don't regret it because of that positivity that I have towards the thing, even the things that seems that it was challenging, it was good. So I think if people are able to have not a flexible, a fixed mindset, but a flexible mindset, to be able to look at things in a different way. It doesn't come easy,
No, never.
right? If you have not practiced that. So being able to really, okay, how can I think outside of this box? Like, this is what I'm viewing, but is there anything good I'm getting from it? Right? And then that might push us to look at things in a different way. If we don't have that shift, it will be difficult. It starts with what good am I getting from this, right? If we immediately start with what bad am I getting from it, you will not have that gratitude spirit, right? But if you're thinking, what good am I getting from this? What am I learning from this? What is helping me to grow? Then we ask the right questions, it will lead us to that path of gratitude.
I love that you're bringing up the question what,
Yes.
right? I often find that asking things from a what question, what am I getting, is much more
Yes.
valuable to get us into a place of gratitude and growth mindset than
Yep.
why.
I try to move away from the whys. Yes.
Because a lot of times we won't know the whys. But if we
Yes.
ask for the what am I gaining in this? What is the possible good that could come of it? Right? It allows us to be open to possibilities.
Yes.
That even possibilities that may seem far off. And I
Exactly.
think about your son, right? And the example you shared with him, shared about him, and really being able to say, okay, in the moment, you
Yeah.
may not be asking while he's bleeding out, right? Like,
Yeah.
what good is going to come of this right now?
Exactly. That's the question,
Right? Like, it may not be the right moment to ask that
Yep.
question, right? It may be, though, looking back, you can see, hey, what did I gain from this?
Exactly.
My son took accountability for his behaviors, right? Had he not made the mistake, he wouldn't have had the learning, right? In
Exactly.
the same way, like, and did I want him to go through that? No, right? Hence all the warnings
Yeah,
before. Please don't do
exactly.
that. But recognizing, but it helped him develop in a different way.
Exactly.
And then it also allowed me to be a parent that I can reflect back on in those moments and say, I wanted to act this way,
Yes.
right? I have
Yes.
lived experience acting this way in my life that I've experienced,
Yep.
but I wanted to do something different. And so I took a risk,
Yes.
right? And in that risk, I was actually able to find a different path
Yes.
that served us. And so I think there's a couple actionable steps that I might kind of just give people as they're thinking about it is getting into some daily gratitude practices.
Yes.
Even on a really hard day, to be able to
Yes.
say what
What?
went well,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
What went well. And it may be like nothing. And I would push back and say, I woke up today,
Right.
right? Or I had a great cup of tea,
Yes.
right? And that may be all there is, but just really developing that muscle to find
Yes.
the little things and even incorporating those things into, practices like gratitude journals or I love a rose thorn exercise
Yeah.
at the dinner table. Like, what was your rose today? What was really good?
Right.
What was a thorn for you?
Yeah.
Those kinds of discussions.
Yes.
Also being able to kind of reframe some negative situations, being able to talk about it like, hey, this negative situation of broken glass and an emergency room visit,
Yes.
right? Not ideal. Would have loved a lesson to come from it that didn't involve those things.
Yes.
And, not or, and I can see where there's goodness in that.
Yes.
And I think another thing that you've highlighted throughout this entire talk has been that open communication and that willingness to have dialogue
Yes.
with yourself, with other people, and really just making sure that that communication is open and that there's a listener engagement, even in the sense of listening to yourself, but also listening to others. And so you've brought so much humility and wisdom in just such rich conversation. Any other final insights you would want to share with our listeners about gratitude and how to really adjust that attitude?
Okay. I would say that being in the present is the hardest thing sometimes. And of course, maybe you've heard mindfulness, right? Being able to understand the simple things in life, even sitting here, this quietness, right? This peace that you're enjoying, the little things that needs to be acknowledged. Sometimes we are so caught up in things that we need to do, right? In the future or in the past that we forget that we're here, right? And you did mention that, like, the fact that I'm here, yes, the day has not been good, but I'm taking a cup of tea, warm tea, right? Be grateful, right? What is happening? You're in a building. Warm enough, right? So it's more of really being present in the moment to be able to acknowledge the simple things that sometimes we just let it pass and we don't see it. Our breath,
I love
right?
that.
Because if we don't have it, then you don't exist, right? Like you can do this for 10 minutes, even if you're a good swimmer, right? You cannot hold your breath forever. You would need it, right? So these little things that sometimes we take for granted, if only we can remember being in the present. I am breathing. I hear my heart beating. That means we're going to go through today, no matter how it will come, right? That is the gratitude. That is the, I would say, the strength you start with, right? Going through the day, your first day. And even if it's didn't go well, just as you said, the what? What happened today, right? What are some of the things that I am grateful for? And then sitting down and being the present and remembering the day, how it went. But I think that will help us taking one moment at a time, not being in the future, not being in the past, but taking one moment at a time, because tomorrow is not promised. We don't know what will happen, right? So that will help us to be really thankful for what we have. We have the day. It's cold outside, but we have the snow. It's beautiful, right?
Yes. It's especially beautiful from the windows
Exactly,
where I
right.
have heat. Like, and again, something to be so grateful
Grateful
for.
about, right? The colors of the trees. Yes, the weather is getting chilly, but look at the different colors, right? You can find beauty in these things. And of course, it takes a lot of practice if you don't do it often. So don't give up. Be patient with yourself. Give yourself grace, right? And just practice it one moment at a time. Nobody's rushing you. And I think that we would find that gratitude every moment in our lives.
I think that's so wise, Abena, because I hear what you're saying is start where you are
Yes.
and develop the patterns that help you integrate gratitude from the smallest things of a favorite pen to write with,
Yeah.
to a cup of tea, to breath in our lungs, to, company with great friends,
Yes.
all of the things that can happen, and really allowing us to be intentional about what we look for.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that the heart isn't there.
Yes.
It means that we're looking for the both and. We see the hard and
And
we're looking at the things that are good within that.
yes.
So as I hear you talk, I go to our viewers and I just want to encourage our listeners to practice gratitude this week. Reflect on your family dynamics, what you've learned from that's been good and bad, what you want to take with you, what you want to leave. And also just listen to Abena's words of wisdom that encourage you to just be in the moment and look for the little things that help you develop an attitude of gratitude. That wraps up our discussion and our conversation today in today's episode of TFC Talks. I hope you have found this discussion as enlightful, and you are as grateful for it as I am, because even during the hard moments, the insight and the wisdom that you brought, Abena, is truly inspiring, and I am so grateful for the time. A huge thank you to you for your wisdom, your expertise, and some practical tools and strategies you shared with us about engaging both internally and within family and relationship dynamics, no matter what. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget to share your episode with someone who might benefit and need a little encouragement when it comes to family relationships, or some wisdom on how to be grateful or to practice gratitude. Until next time, I'm Amanda Davison, reminding you to find gratitude even when it's not easy. We'll see you again at TFC Talks.